First of all, I grew up on Martha's Vineyard, and I am the youngest of 3 kids. My mother was a physical therapist and pianist who played by ear, and she played organ at Wheaton College. My father grew up in a really tiny town in Minnesota where everybody did everything, acting and singing and playing in sports and so on. He played trumpet. I never heard him play. He played violin in the Island Orchestra. I think back row, last seat, because when life got a little hard, he'd just take out his handkerchief, tie it to his violin bow, and waves, "I surrender." So my parents were musical. My older sister was the piano accompanist in the high school, one of 2, and she wrote music for the Island Theater Workshop. She wrote the music for the musicals. So when I was in middle school, or at least that age, she taught me a little bit about chords, major and minor, and I went, aha, and that kind of got me into writing little melodies and so on. So by 9th grade, I was writing and actually writing things down. And what I did in the pandemic with my cat and my daughter's out of the house, is raided my file cabinet, started taking things out of the file cabinet and making them usable, either arranging them for different instruments or saying, forget it, you can go back in the file cabinet. So this is just a little tune that I wrote in 9th grade, and it's from the alto flute collection, Brambles, Silver and Sunshine, Brambles, because this is by Rye Beach with all the weeds. Silver because it's my alto flute. But I got home and the picture was blue because it was reflecting the sky, the sunshine. So this is an air for alto flute, and I'll just play you a couple seconds of it. So. You get the idea, is that it's not just, the straight notes, there's a little bit of emotion in there and so on, and that's always been one of my things, is taking ink off the paper and making it real. So that was in 9th grade, and I just kind of horsed around with writing music in high school, no big deal. And then came the summer before my senior year, I wrote a piece for chorus. I'm not a lyricist, the lyrics were awful. But I did take them, the music, and arranged it for woodwind quartet and piano called Atlantic Sketches. So this is actually 7 little pieces all in one. And this, along with all of my music, is on J.W. Pepper. And if you go to J.W. Pepper and you hit on the cover and then you hit on preview and then audio, if it's a collection, it's like a medley. But if it's a full piece, you'll hear the entire thing and you'll see the score and so on. So you can listen to that on J.W. Pepper. So that was high school. I went to Wheaton College for a year. That's my mom's alma mater. And then I transferred to UNH. And at UNH I had 2 awesome flute teachers. One was Deborah Shorrock, and then the second one is Peggy Votz, who I'm still a very good friend of. And Peggy was absolutely wonderful. Between her and Dave Seiler and Stan Hedinger, they encouraged me to just do whatever. I mean, they were tough, but they encouraged me to write. So I actually did a junior recital as a music ed major and a senior recital, and I played both flute and piano in both. And in the junior recital, I had written a piece called Shades of an Island Summer for woodwind quartet and piano, because I happened to like that combination. And it was about Martha's Vineyard. It had like an opening piece, and then a Digging in the Fog, and then a carousel, and then this big piece where I basically rebelled against all the rules that I learned in music theory, and parallel chords and tries and stuff. Lots of minor, lots of syncopation. And when the pandemic hit, that's the piece that I was like, okay, I have all this time, let's see what I can come up with. So it didn't fit in the file cabinet. But back in the 70s, when the first computer I saw was about the size of this room, And yellow manuscript paper, India ink, lots of yellow whiteout. But the score is all, you can see Wilson whiteout. It's in handwriting. And so I clicked it. It took like 3 months into the computer and came up with the score for Shades of an Island Summer. And decided the 4 movements needed something fun too. I mean, really fun. So I wrote, I'm probably out of the screen. So I wrote a hornpipe, this fun little ditty that I just fell in love with, and added that. So this is 5 movements now, and my daughter did the cover. Rachel Carpenter, Artworks. Rachel Carpenter graduated from New Hampshire Institute of Art here in Manchester in painting and illustration. She's now a floral designer, very good one. But she did the cover to this, and she did the cover to, excuse me, over here. This one, Sea Critters. This, by the way, is my top seller, this collection. So anyway, I did this, and I spent ages, and I'll never forget the moment when I pushed the play button on the finale and it played it back at me. It's like, wow. And that really just got me going. So Shades of an Island Summer is my monumental biggie. And it got to the point where it was done, and I was like, okay, now what am I going to do with it? So I researched publishing companies, and I had also written a couple flute piano pieces, another story that I'll leave out for that, and I submitted this and 2 piano pieces, and the publisher was like, okay, I don't know what to do with them, but okay, we want them. And so I ended up writing more flute piano pieces, and then the story goes on. There's now like 7 collections that I've written. This kind of went on the back burner for a while, and then finally came out published. And again, they're all on J.W. Pepper. So this is Shades of an Island Summer. I was kind of, the fun piece out of this, the hornpipe. It starts with a hand drum. And it just has this little tune. I can play it. So you hear the, and then it gradually comes in the piano. That kind of thing, and so on. So that's Shades, and that was the beginning of the pandemic. And I was like, okay, I got that done, and we're doing piano flute pieces that I'd written and rearranged for publication. And the middle school, former high school teacher light bulb went off. Because after college, I taught at Wilton Lineborough Cooperative for 6 years. Band, chorus, taught history, taught theory, you name it, general music. And then I jumped the fence to Milford, where I taught general music and chorus for 30 more years. I helped out the band people a lot, including did one entire spring concert because the sub just wasn't going to happen, and so on. So, and anyway, continuing on, taking things out of the file cabinet, I wrote this fanfare and badly arranged it back in college in 1977. But it had some hints of being okay. So I took that a couple summers ago and wrote it for concert band. And quite the undertaking, because my middle school brain was saying squeaking clarinets and, this and that and cracking trumpets and so on. But I wrote it for concert band. It finally came out the beginning of 2025. And with the, all the parts and stuff. And I was like, okay, now what? So I went to Allstate, still being a New Hampshire music educator or association person, and then showed it to a couple people, went up to Jared Staub, and I said, I have a present for you. And I said, here's a score. And he's standing there looking at it. And he goes, yeah, we'll do it. He said, I'd like to premiere it. And then he said, in a few weeks. And I happen to have a complete set of the score and parts with me. So there it was. And then April 24th, the symphonic band premiered Harbor Light. And it was just awesome. And then the Nevers Band, I'm friends with a number of people in the Nevers Band. They performed it twice this summer. And so on. And it takes so much time. And by the way, I do all. The engraving, the setting up, the clicking of the notes, the formatting, all that. Nobody is doing that for me. The beginning pieces, yes, but not now. So, Harbor Light, and now we'll have its companion of the concert band version of Into Space. So,
So speaking of Into Space is going to be premiered, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
On February 1st. No.
February 8th up at Kittery. Really? On the 1st?
I think so.
Oh, in Exeter?
Yeah.
Well, surprise, surprise. I thought it was going to be the 8th up at Kittery Dance Hall. Well, that's okay. Better not snow.
Yeah, so I think they're planning on premiering it on February 1st.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I'll check with Aubrey.
And so Into Space is for woodwind quintet.
Right.
I know you've written woodwind quartet with piano. Is this your first time writing for the quintet?
Yes. Yeah. And my brother played French horn in high school. So I'm familiar with French horn.
Very cool.
But yeah, so this is exciting.
Yeah, so it's a new venture. Did you find any challenges writing for this new set of instruments? Or at least this conglomeration of instruments?
Yes. Yes, they're like painting a picture. The instruments all sound different. Different instruments have different capabilities. Again, my brain is hearing professional instruments, but also who is this going to end up with besides the Portsmouth Symphony, people, and so making it playable is a challenge also. Mm-hmm. And ranges, especially when it comes to making it playable, or the dexterity, and so on.
Right.
So yeah, and also the personalities. I remember asking Aubrey the personalities of people, and you have to filter that in. My early quartet things. One of my I had a friend who was a bassoon player who was just he was a stitch. Unfortunately passed away, but yeah, and so that kind of thing all comes into the realm, and so on. The one thing I did was write a few tunes off and on for my school kids when I realized the concert needed this or that or something, and we'd given a small performance with my select chorus in my large classroom. And this is way back, and somebody's cell phone went off, and she took the call and sat there and talked. And so we all just kind of stood there and waited. And I came up with this tune that basically, cell phone, please don't ring. The teacher's going to bag me and I can't do a thing. So I rearranged that for avian alarm clock, because I know one of the questions you prompted me for was inspiration. And I would take walks early in the morning, listen to birds. I went, aha. And the next day took a notebook with me. I'm actually writing down rhythms as I'm walking and high and low and stuff. So the middle of the piece that used to have like imitation ringtones like classical pieces in the middle now has bird tones, and then the instrument's going crazy and so on. So that's, another thing that I've done is taken and getting the older pieces and gone from there.
Very cool. What was your inspiration for Into Space?
Aubrey.
Aubrey.
So let me backtrack a little bit. Composing takes guts, and being a composer takes guts. And so when my first piece, Woodland Duos, came out, my first collection, it didn't look like this, because I now own the rights back and redid some of it. But I went to the New Hampshire Philharmonic concert back in, I think it was 2022 or 2023. And it's intermission time, and I'm sitting there all by myself. And the flute section's sitting up on stage, all by themselves, basically. So I went up and said hi, and I said, you know, I'm so-and-so. Would you like copies? And three of them were like, yeah. And Audrey was like, do you write for flute choir? I'm like, no. And I'm like, flute choir? And then she said, write for flute choir. I'm like, you know, fine. So a year later, write for flute choir. And I was like, okay. I didn't know what to do. But my brother, sister, and sister-in-law and I went to the Boot Cotton Mills Museum in Lowell National Park. And we're standing there looking at all these big looms and listening to them. And I used to do weaving in high school. And I'm hearing this, and I'm like, there we go. Because who used to play, who used to do the actual weaving? But women. And most of the flute choirs consist of mostly girls or women. So I said, aha. So I started doing research on the history of the textile industries in New England, read about the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company and Lowell and this and that, and visited various museums, and ended up writing a piece for the flute choir here called Loomage, which starts off with a tune, da-dum, da-da-da-dum, like, Millie, where are you going? Because the girls would leave the farms to get jobs and so on. And then it has a river theme, and then it has a factory theme. And inside, while the factory theme is going, the main tune, there's this mess in the background, and those are actually weaving patterns, because when you set up a 4-harness loom, they have 5 lines and 4 spaces, just like the music staff. And so I actually use their rhythms and their pitches for the background. And then the piece keeps going and going, and it gets kind of nasty because there were strikes, and then it goes back, and then it gets nasty again, and then all of a sudden the stuff happens at the end, it stops. Because on December 24th of 1935, the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company filed for bankruptcy. And the story that I heard was that all of a sudden Manchester got quiet. It was dead quiet because the loom stopped and the building stopped vibrating. So at the end of my piece, there's 12 beats of measure, 12 beats of silence, because the 12 beats go along with those, with December, the date, and then there's a final chord. So that piece got me going on to the themes besides the nautical kick. And from then on, after writing Loomage, and I was in contact with the Manchester Historical Society, one of the gentlemen there suggested I write about streetcars. So I wrote The Happy Little Trolley, which is a happy little tune, and what I incorporated in The Happy Little Trolley is this do-do-do-do-do-do type of thing with da-da-da-da-da-da, and so on, but it has a solo instrument, which is a tap bell. So the happy little trolley goes ding, ding, ding. And then in the middle, there's like a cadenza for a tap bell. And then it goes back to the main tune. So obviously I have way too much fun with all this stuff. But the happy little trolley, I went into the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, which is wonderful. I talked to a whole lot of people. It's for, again, woodwind, it's for flute choir. And one thing I'm also finding in my writing style is that flute choir, they're independent. A lot of flutes and learn through osmosis, listen to other people, not really being individual or counting. And the flute choir is a great vehicle for teaching independence, teaching confidence, and so on. And this is a great example for that. And my homeward, another piece that I have, does the same thing. And a couple years ago, I had a parent come up to me at the end of a flute choir performance, and just said, thank you. And she said, I could actually hear my daughter. And I'm like, there we go. You know, do not always put the main parts and the top, you know, the better players, I should say, share the wealth. And so that's one of my philosophies. So leaving that in, Bree Mercier, flute, graduate teacher, New Hampshire Philharmonic, the Portsmouth Symphony, I believe, did a faculty recital up at Plymouth in September. And she asked me to write something for her and Serena Gorham because they were doing a joint flute saxophone recital. And so I wrote Echoes of the Notch. And I was like, what am I going to write for them? We've got, you know, one who's strongly classical, one who's kind of jazzy, and so on. So Echoes of the Notch was written because they're both Plymouth State graduates. And the Franconia's Notch is right above that. So I researched Franconia Notch, and it starts off with loon call and bird call, and it goes into like a early people's tune and a colonial tune and this and that and so on, and ends up with a swing dance because of all the grand hotels up there. So this, like Into Space, has a theme page that says this is what's going on, and they're marked in the music, and so on. And so they did this last April, and then they did it in September, and it's been arranged for 4 different sets of instruments since. So Aubrey and Brandon Newbold are playing this here in February, and then in March up at Plymouth State. Yeah, so you can see I'm kind of like on this historical bent and so on. So then finally we will get Into Space. Okay, drum roll. Aubrey asked me to write something spacey, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm not a Trekkie. I can't name the planets. What do I do? So I ended up doing a lot of reading, watching almost, let me find it here, watching almost every science fiction movie I could find, and learned an awful lot and still am. Originally our conversation was about heroes and then Krista McAuliffe. And I was like, okay, cool. But in Concord, the planetarium is the McAuliffe Shepard Discovery Center. So I had to learn about Alan Shepard, who grew up in Derry, who used to ride his bike to the airport to watch the planes take off, and then somebody gave him a job there, and his story goes on from there. And then up at the planetarium, they talk about Rick Searfoss, who later on became a motivational speaker having to do with teamwork, and I just started getting ideas. To me, space is you look up in the sky, and it's this vast, huge area of unknown. And I've learned a lot. And so anyway, the quintet, all the pictures were okayed with the planetarium, and it has the themes in here and so on. Oh, this is what I wanted to give you. I knew I brought it. So the music starts with an F, because I wanted to have some kind of beat. And if you watch a lot of the movies having to do with space and flights and this and that, there's a lot of rock music involved. So I wanted this, okay? And then I was thinking, okay, for a main tune. Now, Chris McAuliffe, who grew up in Framingham, Mass., ended up living in Concord with her family and teaching at Concord High School, teaching social studies. And I read a couple interesting things, well, lots of interesting things, but one was that she was habitually late for class. She was apparently an awesome teacher, very fair but very tough. And I was thinking, okay, teacher, I was a teacher. What do we all do? The kids come down the hall in the morning, they go to their lockers, they go to the classroom, they sit down, they gather a little bit, and then they listen to announcements. And then what does everybody do right before they go out the door? I pledge allegiance to the flag. And there's my main tune. So the main tune is basically, I pledge allegiance to the flag, and then it goes on. And then what happens, so we have the F starting. I don't know if you can see. I'm not used to this. And then we have the main tune hints, and then we have the 16th notes. Those are the flying notes of the pilots. Most of the astronauts were either test pilots or combat pilots or engineers of some sort. I don't have the right terminology, but we've got this fast note thing going on. And those three things continue throughout the entire piece. You've got that dun, 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 the pedal tone, and you've got the theme, and then you've got the flying notes. Now, they didn't all make it. Matter of fact, the 40th anniversary of the Challenger with Chris McAuliffe, that happened this month on the 28th. And so therefore, the piece starts with the beginning, and then it has a memoriam, and honoring a sadder part to commemorate those who passed away in their exploration of space and so on. And what I chose to use for that is a sort of 70s type rock ballad. And in the concert band arrangement, it actually calls for a drum set in the background or options. And one of the reasons for that also is that when they passed away, it took months, but a lot of their things they took to space with them were found at the bottom of the ocean. And one of Krista's things that they found was her Carly Simon CD. So it has a memoriam section, and then it goes back to the pilots and the tests and this and that, and then it builds, and then it stops because they're in space. There's a liftoff, they're in space. And for space, what I did was similar to a couple of my flute piano things, is I wrote on a piece of paper the chromatic scale, and I took a set of dice and threw it. I had attached a number to each letter name, and that was the order of my tune, was whatever the dice ended up in. And then I remember a couple of things having to teach with music school, at the middle school with the band across the hall. So you've got this kind of atonal weird thing, and so on. But then you hear this, and then you have more blats. And that's where the teacher part comes in, is to teach them precision and to watch. So the atonal part comes in, and that's where Adam Kelley-Lane, who works here, was awesome and spent a couple hours with me this summer showing me how to make weird sounds with percussion instruments. I had an absolute blast. It got me going. So the percussion is a major feature in the concert band part, obviously not in the quintet one that's going to premiere. So they go into space, and then they have to go back to Earth. So again, you've got that dun, 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 and you've got the main theme again, and then things go crazy. And then one of the piccolo players in New Hampshire, I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to mention her name, but she said, write a piccolo obligato. So she's got a piccolo part coming. Oh yeah. And so then it ends with, whatever. But another friend that I'm not sure that I'm at liberty to mentioned way back, well, if you want me to test drive it, my quintet can test drive it. I'm like, sure. So in the beginning of the summer, I gave him the parts, and they read it through and gave me a couple really good feedbacks. But he said, I want you to listen to something. So he had recorded the very end on his phone. On the very end, there's this low rumble that starts. I'm like, what is that? And the low rumble gets going and going and going. And then all of a sudden I realize what it is. It's somebody's dog in the background. So it's going and going and going, and the piece, then there's dead silence. And what happens during that dead silence was this, and then the piece stops. So What I brought is a vibra slap. And in the concert band version, it is going to be Scout, because the credits say Scouts Quintet, because they didn't have a name, so their howling buddy is Scout. And so at the ending, when it goes on and on and on, you will hear the vibra slap and hear it, but all of a sudden, build, and then at the end, and that's Scout.
Do you have a favorite instrument to write for?
Not really. It depends. Without a doubt, I wasn't ever going to write another band piece after Harbor Light because it just takes so long, and there's so many factors and variables and technical challenges and all this stuff. But Into Space was definitely screaming concert band. So that's the one where I was like, yeah, okay, fine. But no, they're all different, and different topics or themes lend themselves to different things. You know, in the future, there will be a set for flute and hand drum, because one of the graduates from Keene State College asked me, she said, well, you know, at Riverwoods, when so-and-so played flute and you played hand drum or something, can we do that in my recital? And I'm like, sure. So I wrote it out, and I threw in another one. Here's a second one, and they're like, do more, which is one reason why I have an odd collection of percussion instruments for that. So that's coming up, and then I have idea for a new flute flyer piece, but you know, things just take so long. So anyway, this is the concert band version of Into Space. This is the very ending. It's about 1.5 minutes. Is that okay? And then I'll throw this one in if that's okay. All right. So I'll put this here. So that's the end.
Is there anything else that you feel like people should know, or anything that you wish you had said?
Just simply, you know, the usual, please support the arts. Is right now the arts are really hurting financially, and people are having to leave to go to other occupations and so on, when, you know, the arts just do so much for you. I'll tell you another story before I go. As a middle school teacher, at the end of the year, the spring concert be over, you have those weeks left, you know, before the end. And I always had students who wanted to sing solos and pop solos and this and that. So I'd let them. They'd get up in front of the class and without any accompaniment, just sang the main tune and the solos. And middle school kids need something to do, so I had them write comments, but only positive comments. Even if it was only things like, I like your shoes. So they wrote comments, and I wrote comments, and then what I would do is take and type up the worthy ones and go over them with the student. And if the student wanted me to, like a master class, I would work with them right then and there. A lot of times, they were just done and that was it, yay, you know, and sit down. But sometimes I'd give them a little bit of feedback, and then, you know, you could see the improvement in front of the class. There was this one girl who got up and sang a pop solo, very pretty, very nice. And I also knew her very well, so I knew I could push her. I said, can I work with you a little bit? And she's like, yeah. So I said a few things, and she sang it again, and you could tell it was better. And what I was trying to do was get her to put something into it, to give some heart, to go for it. And I'm not kidding you, by the third time she went through a section of the song, the class was in tears, and she was like, wow. And she went on to touring professionally with the singing group. But just to see her have that guts to give, which a lot of kids don't have, is huge stuff. And that's what music is all about. I call that the magic. And you can't explain it. You can just feel it. So that is one, you know, main takeaway. And that's one of the things that I try to put into my music is the emotion, and don't just do all the technical stuff right, and the right dynamics, and the right fingerings, and the right this and that. Where's the rest? And I hear a lot of young students who play beautifully, but where's, you know, a little bit more. You know, be an actor, be an actress, that kind of thing. And that's, to me, what music is really all about, is the expression.